Bonjour, mes amis. Welcome everyone to the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa. Whether you are here with us in Worship Hall or watching from wherever you may be, know that you are welcome. I'm the Reverend Meter, this congregation's lead pastor, and I'm thrilled to be with all of you as we gather on the sunny first Sunday of March, as we return to our pre-COVID worship time and herald in the return of coffee hour. This morning I am joined by our worship associate Susan and our interim music director Kirk and members of our Three Rivers Singer Choir. Our children are downstairs once again this morning for their Our Whole Lives Comprehensive Human Sexuality class. Yet we are here in this space, so let us rise in body or spirit as we sing together. And let's start singing together this morning. Love will guide us, which you'll find in your gray hymnal as hymn number 131.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan, and I am pleased to serve as worship associate today. Whether you are taking part in this worship celebration from your home or wherever else you may be, whenever you may log on, you are welcome here. We acknowledge, this is going to be a bad day. We acknowledge that our First Unitarian campus is located on traditional, unsurrendered, and unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and that the work of reconciliation is a responsibility of our congregation and of all Canadians. Our goal is to educate ourselves and all who wish to understand, to be of service to those who are at risk, and to advocate for justice. Do take care and take advantage of online opportunities at FirstU to stay in touch during this protracted pandemic. If you are new to FirstU and would like to learn more about us, Please contact us through our email at welcome@firstunitarianottawa.ca. And if you are right here in worship hall with us this morning and would like more information about FirstU, it is available from Dory at the welcome table at the back of the pews. Also, I'm happy to be able to suggest for the first time in years that since we have coffee hour after the service in fellowship hall through the doors to your right, that if you are here for the first time, or if you've been here before but still feel a little new, you should get your coffee or tea at the green mug table. And a reminder to those of us who've been here for some time to be sure to welcome anybody with a green mug. And now here is Mariella from our board with highlights of today's announcements.
Thanks, Susan. Please mark your calendar. There will be a congregational meeting on Monday evening, March 27th, to vote on the master concept plan for our campus plan project. The meeting will be at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Registration for voting will be at 6:30, so we'll ask people to join a little early so the scrutineers can get you all plugged in and identify how many votes we have in the room. Materials related to the meeting will be sent out in the next week or so to the members. And if you weren't able to join either of our two town halls that were in February, we had one in Zoom and one in person, you can go to the Affordable Housing page on the website and you can listen to a recording of the Zoom meeting, which will give you lots of good information. There are three upcoming vacancies on the board to fill at FirstU's next AGM. Serving on the board is a rewarding opportunity to engage with
This couple had been affected by the fire. They were going through the few Lego pieces that they'd been able to salvage from fire, and this was pretty much all they had been able to salvage from fire of everything they had. This was the day after the fire. Of the victims, some very vulnerable families have been offered replacement living spaces, but very few. With Persia, I visited a woman who's still in hospital and she has nowhere else to go. She's physically disabled, she has mental health issues. She mentioned that she finds herself thinking every so often, I must do such and such when I get home, only to remember she no longer has a home. I really can't imagine that situation. The Salvation Army is also assisting victims with material goods. But accommodation is the main issue. Neither the building owners nor the city are able to help with this, although the city is helping with accommodation. I've only recently become a member, but I felt confident when I suggested to Persia that we appeal to the congregation for help. We would get it, and I have been more than justified in my confidence. Persia has been doing the bulk of the running around and organizing. I'm mainly there in a backup capacity. But as matters stand, the UU Fellowship at 400 MacArthur Avenue, who Persia approached for temporary storage, has reached capacity. She has been able to get the help of the Rideau Rock
Jashki greens in the lounge before you leave. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Donna. Now I'd like to call on Kathy Ya, who will be making some comments about the upcoming Canadian Unitarian Council Symposium that's going to be coming up in May here in Ottawa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm in charge of the volunteers for the CUC conference. It's going to be held this May at Algonquin College, and it will be from May 19th to May 21st. We are looking for volunteers to help with all the different jobs, and that's what I'll say, for the conference. And I will put something in the EUU this week looking for volunteers. I know some of you may register to go to the conference. Some of you may decide to do it on a webinar. But I would certainly urge you to come and be a volunteer for some of the different projects. And I will leave my email address and also my phone number so you can call me and let me know if you want to know more about the jobs. We have lots of them, but it'll be a nice time of the year. Have a good day.
Thank you, Kathy. For those who are raring to go with their volunteering, there are a couple of opportunities to volunteer in this week's EUU, including providing a homestay and helping out with the leading the program for kids 0 to 12. So please check it out. We encourage you to sign up for the EUU, our weekly email newsletter. Check our Facebook and Instagram pages and our webpage for notices and updates. Our calendar continues to be as full as ever, maybe even fuller. Though as global health challenges continue, many of our activities still take place online, but as you know, today we get coffee in person. Whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whoever you love, and however you identify, today you are part of our spiritual community. Welcome.
Thank you all who have spoken. And Tess, I want to make sure you know that I chose our topic for today, the path of vulnerability, before the fire, but I am so glad that you are organizing us to help out in any way that we can. That's what communities, faith communities based on the gift of love, do for themselves and for others. Now we can light our chalice. With these words by my colleague Gretchen Haley. There is nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here this morning. No right beliefs or proof of citizenship. No eternal optimism or clarity of conviction. No boundless courage or endless expertise. You do not need to know what brought you here or how you will solve that problem you are turning over and over and over in your mind. Your bills do not need to be paid. The book can be a mess. Your children may have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not be working. Your knees may be creaking. You do not need to already be perfect or even halfway to belong to the circle where grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us as she found us, where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us and this day anew once more. Our chalice is lit. Come, Let us worship together.
This morning's centering words are by Richard S. Gilbert. Be gentle with one another. It is a cry from the lives of people battered by thoughtless words and brutal deeds. It comes from the lips of those who speak them and the lives of those who do them. Who of us can look inside another and know what is there of hope and hurt, or promise and pain? Who can know from what far places each has come, or to what far places each may hope to go? Our lives are like fragile eggs. They crack and the substance escapes. Handle with care. Handle with exceedingly tender care, for there are human beings within, human beings as vulnerable as we are, who feel as we feel, who hurt as we hurt. Life is too transient to be cruel with one another. It is too short for thoughtlessness, too brief for hurting. Life is long enough for caring. It is lasting enough for sharing, precious enough for love. Be gentle with one another. And now, please rise as you are willing and able to join in singing I Know I Can, hymn number 1015 in the Teal hymnal, number 1015.
Is this mic on? I think that what we're experiencing with the tech is a system that was hobnobbed together for years. We're putting a plan together. This time, I am sure it is. The mic is off. I'm over here? The light's on. All right, hold on. We're coming over here. What's the phrase, a movable feast? We are doing what we can. This is a bowl. You knew that. You know that if you've been around that at this time in our worship service, we stop and pause in recognition of the joys and sorrows in our lives, and we honor each of them by placing a stone in a bowl, and the ripples extend through the bowl out, if they could, through the pews and out into the world at home. I'm going to put the bowl down now. I held it up so that you would see and make sure that you knew what was going on. A stone of sorrow and sympathy to our own Jane and Terry, who are vacationing in Vietnam, and on the fourth day, Jane suffered a bad fall, breaking both her left wrist and femur. 6 hours of surgery ensued. She is recuperating well now. They hope to both be back home in Ottawa early in the morning of March 15th, disproving the old Ides of March idea. That was a stone of sorrow and sympathy. This is a stone, although I don't think we will have it for you. Terry sent a photograph he took yesterday. They're on the beach, and he wrote this, quote, "I realize that we are 12 hours ahead of Ottawa, but the ripples of support for Jane, the congregation, are evident. She is truly grateful, and again, they expect to be back in 10 days' time." A card for Jane and Terry is at the back of the hall at the caring table for us to sign. Even if you don't know them, this is a way for us to extend our care on behalf of this group for those who have given and give so much to this community of faith. Let us join now in a moment of silence, during which our thoughts will go wherever they may. We may think of our own unspoken joys and sorrows, or whatever comes to mind. A few moments of silence and stillness before Kirk brings us back together through the gift of music once more.
Dr. Brené Brown, a research professor at the University of Houston, begins her book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead, with the words of this morning's reading. But first, a little warning. There's a common four-letter word near the end of the reading. I looked right at her and said, I frickin' hate vulnerability. I figured she's a therapist. I'm sure she's had tougher cases. Plus, the sooner she knows what she's dealing with, the faster we can get this whole therapy thing wrapped up. I hate uncertainty. I hate not knowing. I can't stand opening myself up to getting hurt or being disappointed. It's excruciating. Vulnerability is complicated, and it's excruciating. Do you know what I mean? Diana nods. Yes, I know vulnerability. I know it well. It's an exquisite emotion. Then she looks up and kind of smiles, as if she's picturing something really beautiful. I'm sure I look confused because I can't imagine what she's picturing. I'm suddenly concerned for her well-being and my own. I said it was excruciating, not exquisite, I point out. And let me say this for the record. If my research didn't link being vulnerable with living a wholehearted life, I wouldn't be here. I hate how it makes me feel. What does it feel like? Like I'm coming out of my skin, like I need to fix whatever's happening and make it better. And if you can't, then I feel like punching someone in the face. And do you? No, of course not. So what do you do? Clean the house, eat peanut butter, blame people, make everything around me perfect, control whatever I can, whatever's not nailed down. When do you feel the most vulnerable? When I'm in fear. I look up as Diana responds with that annoying pause and head nodding done by therapists who draw us out. When I'm anxious and unsure about how things are going to go, or if I'm having a difficult conversation, or if I'm trying something new, or doing something that makes me uncomfortable or opens me up to criticism or judgment. Another annoying pause as the empathetic nodding continues. When I think about how much I love my kids and my husband, Steve, and how my life would be over if something happened to them. When I see people I care about struggling and I can't fix it or make it better, all I can do is be with them. I see. I feel it when I'm scared that things are too good or too scary. I'd really like it to be exquisite, but right now it's excruciating. Can people change that? Yes, I believe they can. Can you give me some homework or something? Should I review the data? No data and no homework, no assignments. Less thinking, more feeling. Can I get to exquisite without having to feel really vulnerable in the process? No. Well, shit. That's just awesome.
funny how context can change the meaning of words. Well, shit, that's just awesome. Hearkening back to that reading Susan shared with us just a minute ago, is there anyone here whose experience of vulnerability regularly feels exquisite? If so, please come forward. I've warmed up the mic for you. No takers. All right. Well, what's the saying? We're all in this together. Back in my undergraduate years, a dorm mate once told me about what had happened in his acting class earlier that day. Two student actors were going through their lines between a couple, a man and a woman having a fight. But the energy just wasn't there until their instructor asked them to make one simple change: to finish each of their lines with 3 little words: I love you. The effect was transformative and immediate. A one-dimensional argument became alive as emotions became complex and interwoven. I'm furious at you. You betrayed me. I love you. Why did you do that? I love you. You get the point? Can you imagine this? 3 little words. Open us up to vulnerability. And in that afternoon, in that drama classroom, did the trick. How often I have wanted to counsel individuals and couples in my role as pastor by saying, add 3 little words at the end of every single thing you want to say to your partner. Somehow I haven't been brave enough to try that. But at least now I have witnesses, and so maybe I will. I want to mention off the bat that I'm taking that you may ask what the strength and delicacy of lace, the title I've chosen for this talk, has to do with anything I'm going to say. And looking at the clock, it's not going to, the portion of this that goes back to this book, The Strength and Delicacy of Lace, letters between 2 writers, authors from the United States, who in many ways couldn't be more different. The native Puebla woman, Leslie Martin Silko, and the Ohio-born white poet, James Wright. The 2 only met twice in person. One was at a reading Silko was engaged in Michigan. Wright was in attendance and shook Silko's hand afterward. And a few years later, after reading Leslie Marmon Silko's novel Ceremony, he wrote to her saying, "Thank you for that book. It's one of the 5 greatest books I've read on the North American experience." And so over the next year and a half and some, the 2 began writing letters to one another. The second time they met, James Wright was on his deathbed in a hospital in New York, dying of tongue cancer. The collection is edited by James Wright's widow, Annie, and it's beautiful and unpreachable for the most part, because it's one of those things where the meaning accumulates over the pages, even if it's a short read. So I recommend it to you, and we'll move on. This was going to be a second reading, but I knew that with the announcements we may go a little long, so I'm including this in my remarks and I'll follow suit. This is from my colleague, Alea Kelmer. She writes, "In the church I serve, we have a Sunday morning worship leader who welcomes everyone at the start of the service. They give the necessary announcements, including telling the congregation that large print orders of service and assisted listening devices are available from the ushers. On the best Sundays, which don't happen as often as I wish, the worship leader mistakenly says that assisted living devices are available from the ushers. I am always secretly rooting for this mistake because it makes everyone laugh, and because it would be excellent if the ushers really had assisted living devices to give out. I would raise my hand for one every time. I know I'm not alone. A lot of us feel like our lives should have come with instructions, or maybe they did, but we lost our only copy long ago." My colleague continues, "7 years ago, I left my marriage of over 2 decades. We had 2 young children at the time. During the day, I could mostly live with the weight of my decision, but at night, the voices of my fear and guilt were relentless. Had I chosen my own happiness over my children's? Would this become a terrible turning point in their lives? I prayed for operating instructions, for some sign we would all get through this. I let them have too much screen time as I juggled ministry and motherhood. I was raggedly determined, driving around in a borrowed truck to collect Craigslist furniture and writing sermons in the middle of the night. A few months in, an older woman in the congregation visited me. I left my marriage with young kids to raise, she told me. I still remember how tired I was. You need to let us help you. I started to protest, and she stopped me. We know you are fine, she said quietly, fiercely, kindly, and you still need to let us help you. Luckily, I realized this was the sign. Kindness offered from someone who had traveled our particular hard road before us is always the sign. So I let them help me. Members of the congregation came with paintbrushes and scrub brushes and donated pots and kitchen utensils, some of which looked suspiciously new. They put together my children's bed and painted the walls of our new apartment. I was undone by their kindness, by their tenderness, and healed by it. None of us have a map. We are all just making the way as we go, but we can help each other get through the painful places we know most intimately because we have lived in them. There really are assisted living devices, and they are us. We have each other. If I have mentioned this before, I apologize, but that reading reminds me of the gift a previous congregation gave me when I was in the throes of getting over the loss of my first marriage. After church one day, the board chair and a member of that congregation's committee on ministry pulled me aside, said, "Let's go into the office," and said to me, in effect, "We see you struggling, son. Take some time for yourself. We don't want to see you until 2 weeks from Tuesday. If you need more time, let us know." I was serving a congregation near California's Central Valley at the time, so I drove out to the desert with a car full of gas and no reservations to stay anywhere. I drove out to the desert, Nevada, Arizona, and I watered it with my tears. Before then, I had felt, Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. anger, acceptance, bargaining, yada, yada, yada. I had been living those in 3-day increments, a cycle of 3 days. And within a couple hours on the road, those cycles came in every 45 minutes. I tried the biblical injunction of the ancient Hebrews of rending your clothes. Didn't help. But watering the desert with my tears did. And a few nights from coming home, the magic happened. I journaled late into the night, tried to sleep, but the winds of grief, and I don't even know what to call it, still had me in their grasp. I journaled all night long until a sense of clarity emerged. The clarity stated that left me understanding that it wasn't my fault or hers. It just was. And while the healing of that night didn't heal everything, I knew then that I was on the right road. Wisdom from Howard Thurman, who served the first intentionally interracial church in the United States in San Francisco. He writes, "There is something in you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in other people. And if you can't hear it, then you are reduced by that much. If I were to ask you, what is the thing that you most desire in life? You would say a lot of things right off the top of your head, most of which you wouldn't believe, but you would think that you were saying the things I thought you ought to think and that you would say." He continues, "But I think that if you were stripped of whatever there is in you that is literal and irreducible, and you tried to answer that question, the answer might be something like this: I want to feel that I am thoroughly and completely understood, so that now and then I can take my guard down and look out around me and not feel that I will be destroyed with my defenses down. I want to feel completely vulnerable, completely naked, completely exposed, and absolutely secure." Many of us, I hazard to guess, feel like Brene Brown did that day in a therapist's office, that getting into a place where we feel vulnerable is excruciating. And yet I've learned both in my life and in our ministry that there are times we have to lead with vulnerability. Let me explain. In the congregation I served for 12 years in the state of Ohio, there was a congregation that was formed right at the beginning of my time there and really didn't come of age until about halfway through my 12 years. And after a little bit, we realized that we needed a relationship with that congregation. It's a Methodist church, similar to your United Church here, our United Church here. And it was founded by a former bishop who said, "I'm going to seed a church at the corner of Parsons Avenue, in a part of town adjacent to downtown that was a pocket of poverty and on the line between," and the States is ghettoized, as I know that you know, between an African-American community and poor whites from Appalachia. Poverty was what these people had in common, and geography, but their cultures were mighty different. And so Bishop Siegel brought people in the community together. He had contacts. Some were business leaders, some were political activists that knew that part of town. And he said, "We're going to form a church, and we're going to take 2 years to plan it out. How are we going to do worship? How are we going to do music that will move people of different cultures. It was intentional, and it was difficult, and it was brilliantly executed. They started a free store. They started a healthy food co-op. They started a bikes for people, where you could get your bike repaired and get a really good deal on a very used bike or not so used bike. And so our congregation said, we want experience there. So we started training our volunteers to go and volunteer at their activities. We processed clothes, we passed out food, and we got to know the folks there. We made sandwiches for their lunch, and we joined them in sharing the meal. And the thing we learned again and again was whenever we encountered someone new, we had to lead with vulnerability, because they saw us as the rich folks from the suburban part of town. The congregation I served was in the city, but it was in a middle to upper middle class suburban part of town, kind of not too different from this. Even if it was saying, I don't know the time, do you know the time? And that's an awkward way to greet someone. That's not really poetic. But every little thing helped. Leading with vulnerability, leading with our shared humanity, that made the connections possible. As I said last week in a quote from the Aboriginal woman Lila Watson, who is credited of saying, although it came from the female Aboriginal community that she was working in, the commune, if you're here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if your liberation is caught up with ours, then come and let us work together. That's what I'm talking about. Not going to help people, but to be with them as we understand our liberation is caught up with theirs. Mariella announced the vote coming later this month to agree, or not, on passing our land over to OAHS in part. Assuming that goes forward, and I absolutely hope it will, our work is just beginning on learning how to lead with vulnerability so that we are good neighbors to the people that we are asked to come and be our neighbors. You've heard me say, I have to find the quote because I've got this wrong far too many times, and maybe I won't find it. There's a joke about Unitarians and Universalists, and it goes something like this. The Universalists believed that a loving God was too good to damn anyone, would be too good to damn anyone. And the Unitarians believed that they were too good to be damned. Now, I'm hearing laughter, and that's good because it's funny. But there's always something true and something maybe even tragic about laughter. It speaks to a truth. The Unitarian side of our tradition are people who feel they're too good to be damned. And so leading with vulnerability is not always easy for us. We have worked hard to become skilled and experts in our fields, but we have to remember there are times to put that aside and consider that as some of the tools in our tool chest, but not all of the tools in our tool chest. The other tools are leading with vulnerability and our willingness simply to be people with other people. What was it Brene Brown's therapist told her? No data and no homework, less thinking, more feeling. Someday, maybe, with more feeling. The feeling of kinship, the feeling that comes when we are seen in the fullness of who we are and held, not judged. The peaceful, happy feeling that comes in those moments. Someday, the feeling of vulnerability will become a bit more exquisite and a bit less excruciating. When that moment comes, we'll know that we've been able to help make the world a warmer home for all. Thank you. Thank you.
This congregation has a long history of care. Will the ushers please come forward to start the offering? Of care, vitality, and bringing people together to move the arc of justice forward. We have been able to live into our hopes and dreams because of the generosity of those within and beyond this community. Whether you are here in Worship Hall or anywhere else, you are part of this community. To make a gift in support of the work of this congregation, you don't need to use the baskets that are now being passed among our pews. Wherever you are invited to go to our website or contact our finance manager to find out how to make a donation or to keep up with your pledge. Our gifts are freely given and gratefully received. We dedicate these gifts to the work of this community of faith, serving human wholeness, caring for the planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another.
As the Three Rivers singers come forward, let me invite you to rise as you are willing and able, and join with us in singing Lean on Me, which is in your teal hymnal number
Lean
Before we close this time of worship and reflection, a reminder that coffee hour will resume out those doors. Our team looking like they are ready. And please join me in expressing deep gratitude to Terrell, Evelyn, and Elizabeth for making the return of coffee hour possible. For those watching from home, an informal online fellowship hour will begin at 11:45. You can find the Zoom link on our website or in the Friday afternoon's issue of the EUU. And also, as mentioned before, leafy greens, courtesy of the good folks of Ajasti, are available for those who would like some from the grow towers in the old volunteer room near Fellowship Hall. We extinguish our chalice this morning to these words by Kimberly Quinn Johnson, who quotes a line from June Jordan's poem for South African women. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted to this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have a faith in the future that is not known. We are the ones we have been waiting for. This morning's chalice is extinguished, but the spark of our connection and faith remain. Kirk, Three Rivers, will you bless us once again? Thank you. If you wish, lift up your hands to extend our blessings to those here and beyond, as now we return to the challenge of helping the world come alive in love. Let us go forward in peace, my friends. Go in peace.